Alright everyone, hello. In this Halloween season, you know that we gotta talk about some things that maybe spook some people. And one of those things is none other than the Ouija board. By the way, if you want to see these videos 2 weeks earlier, consider subscribing to my Patreon, where you not only get all these videos, but also recipe cards, specific deity profiles, and lots of other interesting things to look at. Video tiers start at $10 a month, so definitely consider checking it out. So, when we talk about divination tools, I will be very clear when I say that there is no divination tool that is good, and there is no divination tool that is bad. They are all tools. It'd be like asking me if a knife is good or bad. You can hurt people with a knife. You can also accomplish a lot of great stuff, like cooking your food. So it's not that the knife itself is the problem, it's the way in which you use the thing that becomes the issue. And the same can be said for the Ouija board, for tarot cards, for runes, for any other tool that you would use to contact any non-corporeal entity. And of course, the board itself, right, says the deluxe version of the mystifying oracle, and so you might wonder, like, where did this thing come from? Has it always been a tool of contacting the dead? And the truth is, yes and no, right? So in the 19th century, this Elijah board guy, he is the one who patents this board, but it had been around for a little bit already as a talking board, and this was something that there were some shams, right? Some people who claimed to be speaking to spirits through them, but also there were other people who understood this to be a parlor trick, a game, just a normal goofy little thing, and that it wasn't anything serious about it, despite what any of the Ouija board movies would have you believe. But the point is, in the 19th century, there was, just like today, a mix of opinions. Can you actually talk to the dead with this thing? Is it just a game? A lot of people will say it's both, right? And those people who say it's both, especially, tend to be ones who either have been duped by somebody using these things, or who they themselves are doing the duping. I think one of the funniest things about the Ouija movies was that one of the people in them is absolutely one of these snake oil salesmen who just, you know, kind of moves the board around and says things people want to hear, and then takes their money and then goes on home with it, right? So she buys this thing as a prop, but before that she had been doing much of the same thing, where she's having seances, where she contacts people's relatives, and all that stuff, tells them comforting things, and then moves on, but it's all just lies and what we would call soothsaying, right? You could see very viscerally now why the concept of soothsaying is not allowed in many parts of the Bible, because what they're talking about especially is not just talking to the dead, which is silly when you could be talking to God instead, but also the concept of fraud, soothsaying, saying soothing things, saying things people want to hear. However, if I hold up this board right here, here's the thing about it. There's nothing about the board itself that's a problem. This is our board. This is about as dangerous as the keyboard I use to operate my computer. There's nothing more dangerous about this than that. And the planchette, I mean, they make them a little different nowadays, because there's not even glass in this thing. Like, there's not even glass in it. There's usually supposed to be glass, and the lore is that you can actually look through the planchette and see whatever spirit that you're talking to. Again, I don't think I need to say it, but nonsense. That's not really how anyone who works with this kind of stuff will tell you that it works. I mean, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was out there trying to make spirits physically manifest. They weren't using goofy rinky-dink printed on little planchettes like these. But the very basic premise of this board is that there's a certain riddle or a certain rhyme that you can say to get started, and that after that you can ask your questions, and at the very end you want to say goodbye, or else this just becomes like a big ol' door that just stays swinging wide open, right? It's like unlocking your door at night and hoping for the best. That's what people say. They also say you should never play alone, right? And they should always have one or more person, which is also a great way, right, to have someone else influencing this board on accident. But the reality is, just like tarot, in which it's not the deck necessarily that's giving you the answers, it's whatever entity's behind it, so too does the Ouija board work that way. So what do we see when we see people playing with the Ouija board? They don't have a specific spirit in mind. That's probably problem number one. Whenever I see people use these and they talk about how dangerous and spooky it is, well, yeah, anytime I've ever seen a movie, it's always, who is there? Who is out there? Anyone come talk to me? They don't have a clear idea of who to speak to. Now, this becomes a problem because one of the best analogies I've seen for it is, imagine if you live on like a busy street in Manhattan and you just open your door and you invite the first person walking by into your house. You don't know who that person is, you don't know their history, you don't know their intentions, you don't know their moral compass or what they're willing to do and not willing to do, and you just let them walk directly into your house. You know, at best, if they steal a couple things from you, that would be considered lucky, but at worst, you might have accidentally invited like a serial killer or someone totally crazy into your house, and now good luck trying to get them out without yourself experiencing some real bodily harm. For some reason, people forget that stranger danger includes all entities, whether you can physically see them or not, and you don't want to just go running up to entities you don't know and letting them into your space and having access to your energy. The second problem I often see people, do with this is that they expect, like, the ghost or whatever to physically move the planchette. And as much as I believe in, spirits and other things like that, as much as I have tarot cards and I, talk to God through them, and I get the signs, like a tingle in my ear that lets me know which card I need to pick, God isn't the one shuffling the cards physically. I am, right? So when things fall out of my hand, sometimes, obviously we like to say, oh, this card jumped out at me, as if it has its own energy and conscious, or God threw this card at me as if he physically took it and whipped it out at me. But reality is, it's just the way in which I am shuffling the deck that gives me hints and tips me off that, ooh, this card, shuffled weird and came out. Okay, maybe this is what I'm supposed to pay attention to. These are little signs and tricks and things that I have developed as a language with God, but it's still me physically shuffling. And when you have an Ouija board, it's still you physically moving the planchette. It's not the ghost, right? You might feel intuitively pulled to come towards a K or an L or whatever else that's over here, right? You might feel that you are being called to do something like that, or that you just find yourself, when you are really meditative, just drifting that way as you are kind of lost in thought. Sure. Kind of reminds me of automatic writing. But it's not the ghost itself. And a lot of people are like, haha, this doesn't work, right? Because they're just expecting the board to do insane Hollywood-esque shit on its own. No, that's not really how that works. If you want to have that kind of experience and get into that kind of thing with an Ouija board, you are best off doing something like, I don't know, having any kind of incenses going that heighten psychic abilities, getting into a meditative space, and allowing yourself to become the extension of the planchette. Being fully aware that it is you and your intuition that is pushing the planchette where you want it to go. And the last mistake I see people making with this is that they give it too much power off the bat. This is cardboard. Really sturdy cardboard. I can't even bend it that well, but it's cardboard. I got it at Spirit Halloween. And I got it as a fun little game to play on Halloween, right? Yes. I am absolutely planning on being one of those people in the Ouija movies who just gets a bunch of friends together, piss drunk, and plays with the Ouija board. Because I fully expect that nothing's gonna happen. If anything, we'll probably be the ones pushing it around, having a good time, and then that's pretty much it. And if somehow I find some spirit that wanted to pop through and blah 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 blah, I'm a witch. Just get rid of it. It doesn't matter, right? It's not like all the drama of all of these movies where some big spooky demon comes in and everyone's crying, shitting and throwing up, freaking out about it. No, just get rid of it. It's really not that difficult. Being in the place that I live in, around here in the forest, I would expect that any spirit, miscellaneous ones that would pop by, just, answering a completely anonymous general catch-all call, would probably be like a fairy or something. I wouldn't expect like an actual ghost or spirit. Maybe the spirit of the people who built this house, sure, maybe. But I have a feeling those people have left. They don't seem to be around. Between my house spirit and everything else, I don't think they're still here. I also don't think that even if it wasn't for my house spirit, they would be here, because they probably moved on and gone somewhere else, or stayed with their family. So there you go, I would be a little worried to accidentally invite a fairy in here. For multiple reasons, but again, It's as simple as saying, okay, thank you, but no thank you, right? Like, that's all you gotta do. So, you know. Also, another thing is, if you have an Ouija board and you give it that energy, right, because of all of the cult classics and all of the, you know, cultural energy surrounding it, how spooky it is, how dangerous it is, blah, blah, blah. I mean, my god, my mom was having a panic attack when I bought this thing, because she used to play with one, and she would, I guess, talk to somebody that gave her the name of her grandmother, which she didn't know before. So that freaked her out. She shredded hers and threw it out and never looked back. She would also tell me she read a book about some stories where, like, the Ouija board told somebody using it that they were gonna die and they couldn't handle it, so they just, like, deleted themselves. Which to me sounds like the spirit, if there was one, was trolling the hell out of her. You know? Or that maybe she was just having, like, mental episodes and was blaming it on the board. But a lot of people will try to put those scare tactics out there and say, like, oh, you know, demons, bad spirits try to hurt you through the board. No, they don't. They do not. Not really. Especially not if you know who you're talking to. Like, if I consecrated this board to God and used it to talk to God, it would be no different than any of my tarot decks. And I would have nothing to worry about. So if you wanted to use an Ouija board, right, and you wanted to have this as a divination tool, because it is a valid divination tool, you definitely would want to lock it to a specific entity. You would definitely want to be aware of how it actually works, which is that, you know, you are moving it based on your intuition of where you need to go. And you would also want to be aware of, like, not feeding into the cultural zeitgeist around this thing. You don't want to be giving this more power than a piece of cardboard reasonably actually has. The Ouija board can do nothing to you, but what do we know about egregores and poltergeists? We know that where people pour energy, energy manifests, energy takes form. So don't pour your fear into this, and it won't spit it back in your face. You understand? All in all, if you guys have been ever having questions, especially in the spooky time, about Ouija boards, what they do, why they're here, whether or not they're useful tools, a lot of that is subjective and it depends on you. It depends on if you're comfortable enough to pick it up and try it out. But I could say definitively that no, there's nothing dangerous about this very, very cheap little freaking toy setup here. And that knowing that, yeah, it was originally made as a little 19th century game by some guy who happened to cash in on the talking board phenomenon. There's nothing else to it. It's just a child's game. There's nothing spooky about it. All of those movies where they have an Ouija board and things that all go wrong, usually, if there's actually a ghost, it's because they just called out to anyone who was there rather than someone specific. And other times it's just because they psyched themselves out. That's all there is to it. And the thing is, as Christian witches, it's really important that we don't succumb to that kind of fear and hysteria, because that's what's going to make everything all gugots, and then you're going to end up like any one of these absolute shysters, these ex-witches turned Christian who basically did something stupid and then got scared and ran back to their comfort zone. Don't be like those people. Those people are embarrassing. But with all that said, I do hope this was a helpful overview of my thoughts on the Ouija board, how to use it safely if you'd like, and why people seem to be afraid of it so much. With all that said, I will see you guys next time for some more discussions on Christian magic in our spooky season. See ya!